So let's talk about recession proofing your resume, because right now a lot of us are hearing about these economic forces that are driving kind of financial challenges for a lot of people in the industry. We're seeing layoffs happening already in the tech sector. There's a lot of spicy and somewhat negative knowledge that's kind of coming out into the sphere right now. So what we want to do today is help you learn how to stay safe in your job, and also if something happens, to recover a little bit better. So in just a moment, we'll introduce ourselves right now. We've got Paul and Kristen on the line, as well as myself. So a little bit about me. I am a certified professional services marketer and the co-founder here of Pi. In fact, I'm the chief ingredients officer, which means I kind of specialize in the tech side of things. So the technologies that you might need, the tech stack, and how to measure the performance of those tools. I'm also a serial job hopper. So the longest I think I've ever spent at a job was 6 years, and that was my own company. So I've been around the block a little bit when it comes to using my resume to get ahead, and I'm happy to share that knowledge with you today. Also joining us, Paul and Kristen. So Paul, kick us off.
Okay, thank you, Kathryn. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name's Paul Matson. I am a marketing coordinator for an engineering firm based in Vancouver, but located Canada-wide. I have been here for 16 years, which apparently makes me a bit of an anomaly, at least within the AEC sector. I was just lucky enough to find a wonderful company, but I hope to talk a little bit about what keeps me here, apart from having dirt on all the executives, which I may or may not, but I have plausible deniability.
This is being recorded, Paul, so just be careful.
Oh, I thought that was a joke. Okay. I'd like that stricken from the record, please. Okay. Thank you.
All right, Kristen, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. My name is Kristen Ruiz. I'm a professional writer and editor, as well as a self-proclaimed grammar geek. Not to copy Kathryn, but I would consider myself a serial job hopper as well. Most recently, that occurred involuntarily due to a massive layoff. I was part of the tech industry, proposal team leader, and I unfortunately got cut amongst many hundreds of other people. So this is relatively fresh in my mind to talk about, what comes next, how to recession proof as the unexpected is potentially upcoming. I've been in proposal development specifically for just over 4 years, but my writing and editorial experience spans more than a decade. And that's in a couple of different industries, from academia, nonprofit, trade publication, and then with proposal specifically. Started out in AEC, went to manufacturing, then to tech, and presumably now back to AEC, as I soon will be joining AECom. So that is me.
Congratulations. Wonderful. All right. So let's go ahead and get this kicked off. To get started here, what we're going to talk about when we're speaking about recession proofing, and again, with most of the folks, with most of you have been to presentations that we've put on in the past, but this is super conversational. So if you've got comments, questions, words of wisdom, don't be shy in the chat. Drop your questions, because we're here to answer those. And afterwards, I also want to let you know that we are going to have a conversation with as many of the panelists as are able to attend for half an hour afterwards, so we can kind of have a debrief and you can ask your questions there. So don't be shy. This is designed for you to get the information that you need, and we're here to deliver that for you. So here are 4 ways that you can recession proof yourself through your resume. And we're going to talk about this on an individual level, and then expand, maybe talk about how this relates to your teams a little bit as well. But step 1 is find a common thread. We're going to talk about how you can build a golden thread that kind of brings your entire work history together into a coherent picture, so that you're not showing up and feeling like, gosh, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense as an aggregate, right? We're bringing your entire work history into a single beautiful picture that has been crafted by all those puzzle pieces, right? Second, we're going to talk about how to get out of your comfort zone, which is a commonly held belief that getting a little bit uncomfortable can make us grow a little bit more. But we're thinking about specifically those fields that may not be proposal related, that if you're not getting much traction in proposals, you could start considering those as well. Third, we're talking about describing skills and not experience. So skills-based resumes for the win. How do we talk about where your skills fit in? So again, if you're specifically seeking proposal roles, that's great. But there's other opportunities to kind of recession-proof yourself by looking at different industries. And then finally, networking. We're going to help you make friends. Pi is here to help you make friends in the industry, so you don't have to rely on random LinkedIn searches ever again. And then also helping get that networking safety net. Rita, I do speak incredibly fast. I can slow down a little bit, but I tell you, I've had about 6 liters of caffeine this morning, which Ben informs me is about 1.5 gallons, because we are so excited about the launch. So I'll try to modulate that. I appreciate you, Rita. That's kind. All right. The key takeaways that we're going to be bringing to you today is that your resume experience needs to be measurable, memorable, and modern. And the reason that I'm bringing these 3 things up, and I'm going to kick it over to Paul, and then Kristen's going to talk in just a minute about her experience as well. But what I've been hearing from folks in the industry, specifically managers, is that they say it's really hard for them to hire you if you don't have these elements on your resume. So let's talk about the fact that all of your experience, all of your skills need to be described as numerical outcomes, not just the experience that you can say I did X, Y, or Z. It needs to be actual numerical inputs, right? Second, you need to have an interesting theme or format to your resume. And that's why we're talking about the golden thread that helps you weave an entire coherent picture of what your resume is going to look like as we continue through this process, right? So measurable, memorable, and then modern. So not only the appearance of the document, but also the fact that you're thinking about what the future of proposal management looks like. And that can be from a tech perspective, it can be from a best practices and principles perspective, or a human-centered approach. Okay, so you're going to learn how to be measurable, memorable, and modern today. Cool. Anybody remembers the economic forces that kind of damaged our profession back in 2020? I recall that I was working for a company called Dude Solutions. I was on a team of 4. Everybody but me got downsized, and then I had to do the entire work of that team. Okay, so back in 2020, proposal managers were on the chopping block immediately. The entire teams got leveled, and they had to be hired back later because they had that institutional knowledge that those companies valued, right? But we are potentially facing another situation that, because proposal managers end up on the front lines of the chopping block just a lot of the times. It's the fact. There's a couple domains that tend to be at risk, and we fall into that. So we don't want to be the frontline staff that's the first to be laid off at our companies. But if it happens, here's a little bit more information about how we can move ahead. We don't have to be like these garden gnomes and be terrified about what's about to occur. I think Kristen and I like to laugh there. The sky is not falling. There's lots of opportunities still. And what I want you to know is that although you're hearing about layoffs in the tech space and you're hearing about all the stuff in the news, a lot of it is a little bit overblown. There's still a ton of proposal manager jobs available. People need proposal managers and proposal writers. So kind of keep an eye, take that with a grain of salt. Be thoughtful about how you consume media right now. And with that in mind, item number 1, finding a common thread. So if you're going to pivot, if you're going to recession-proof yourself, if you're going to make yourself more sticky in the industry, you need to be able to tell a story. The great news, as proposal managers, you already know how to do this. If you're a great proposal writer, if you're a good salesperson, you know how to get that story in front of a customer. And so what you're doing in this context is simply using your skills to sell yourself, as opposed to selling the opportunities that are accompanying with your company. So finding that golden thread. The golden thread ties your resume together. So from that first job that you got out of college, which sounds like Paul's might be the same. Maybe you had a couple in between, but it's pretty close. Whether you're like Paul and you've been sticking around at a place for a long time, or if you're like Kristen and I, who have been kind of bouncing around a little bit more, trying to find that golden thread or that theme that brings the entire resume together is where you're going to get the cash money. Okay. So here, I would like to give you a case study on myself, and we can talk about how I developed my own golden thread. So at first I came out of college and I was a chemist at Department of Defense labs, where we had gas masks and chemical antidotes. It was very intense. I worked at the Salt Lake City lab for the Olympics and U.S. Football steroid testing, right? So I started off as a chemist. I went to be a science teacher, and then, like all of us, conceivably, we all fall into proposals somehow, and I became a kind of a technical writer and proposal writer. Then I was a data analyst, then I was a process improvement facilitator, and then back to proposal writer, proposal manager, department manager, right? So these things seem like they don't have anything in common at first blush, right? You're saying, how are you conceivably going to pitch yourself as someone with a single nugget that makes sense? But what I did was I sat down and I kind of thought about it. And I came up with the fact that, my golden threads were analysis and education. So through all of the work that I've done, including as a proposal manager, I've always been experimenting and tracking data. So how well is this proposal process working? What does our win rate look like? How does our utilization work out? All of that is surprisingly similar to the ways in which you might run a chemical experiment. So I said, okay, let me think about how I can describe my analytical skills as I went from scientist to proposal writer and now to entrepreneur. Second, I have always been an educator. I'm a certified health education specialist. I was training people as a teacher. I was training people as a proposal team leader, right? Like you've got to train your SMEs. So I found that through every role that I have, I was analyzing and always educating people based on what I found. This has helped me to build a stronger presence in the industry because it helps me describe what my actual skills look like and say, hey, this is going to be transferable to your process improvement or to your additional sales operations, revenue operations, whatever we've got on the table. Okay, if you're a writer, think about the fact that you may have a golden thread that looks something like this. Maybe you're very good at interpreting, critical thinking, right? You're really good at diving in. As RFP managers, we have to be. You have to understand what the customer is asking, and you have to understand really how your organization can meet those needs. You are exceptional at understanding requirements and synthesizing them into a project plan. You're probably an incredible teacher as well, whether you think of that or not. You've had to spend a lot of time training folks. Maybe you see yourself as a communicator or a team builder or a storyteller or a persuader, but whatever it is, if you can find that single nugget, you can build your resume around that theme and then ultimately either make a transition or make yourself a stronger proposal management candidate because you demonstrate that you know yourself a little bit more. If you're a proposal manager, think about your golden threads that could be project management. Many of us have PMPs, right? Group facilitation is something that you're also probably really great at, is getting those little nuggets of wisdom out of every single subject matter expert. So how do we make sure that they're being included here? You also, believe it or not, are experts in customer service because you serve internal customers and make sure that they're consistently satisfied, modifying your processes to make sure that they are successful and delivering the impact that they deserve. So you also have the opportunity to consider your expertise in process design, business analytics, or even projection into the future. So a lot of futurists that I know came from the proposal management space, believe it or not. So if you can consider these various aspects of who you are as an employee, and you identify that golden thread and present it in front to the customer, which is your potential hiring manager, right? You're able to describe your skills a little bit better and therefore be able to deliver the key aspects of what a resume ought to do. So if you feel like you understand your own golden thread, I would love to see them in the chat if you have an opportunity to think about that. And let's talk about how we use the golden thread to tell a story. Because we talked about measurable, memorable, and modern, right? We want to make sure that we're talking about the job itself when we're presenting our past experience, so past performance, just like you would submit in an RFP. Then we think about what we achieved, your metrics, your numbers, your hard data. You want to be able to tell that story. You know, I was hired on in 2014. By 2016, we had expanded to 10 people and we had a win rate of 70% or whatever, whatever those metrics look like, and make sure that you're describing the trends in the past. As we're going to hear in just a minute about how skills-based resumes play into this environment, we're going to talk about how you can use the skills and connect those pieces into the future as a great employee at whatever company you're looking to stay with or depart to. So here's an example of a past performance that you're going to want to include on your resume. Instead of just saying, I worked at this company and did X, Y, or Z tasks, you use numbers to help drive those points home. So I was the manager of a 4-person sales response department. We delivered $10 million in project wins, cut the cost per bid by 20%. And you're describing specific skills that you have, saying that Tableau plays a role into this particular job. So again, measurable, memorable, modern. That's what I've got as far as golden thread. Are you ready to hear about how to abandon your comfort zone and start reaching out for experiences beyond RFXs? Because that's where Paul's going to take us now. You ready? All right, Paul, take us away.
Great. Thank you very much, Kathryn. So Thank you, everyone. I'm very excited to be here and talk about abandoning my comfort zone. Personal note, I am actually abandoning my comfort zone even as I speak because I don't often speak on any panelists. By the way, because I am unpracticed in this regard, please feel free to create your own drinking game at home with any filler words I happen to be using during this section. Let's see, half a drink for every another half for every and a full shot for every Anyway, let's
coffee
go.
ready, Paul.
Let's jump into it. Next slide, please. Okay. So yeah, there are so many wonderful ways you can position yourself when it comes to putting yourself a bit out there, even if it's not something you specifically aim towards. Like, for example, I did not study to become a marketing coordinator. I do not have a marketing background. I have a psych background, and I'm so pleased to say psychology has such a broad purview that marketing definitely plays into it. But for example, if you're wanted to get out of, say, proposal writing, proposal management, frontline sales is, for example, an excellent one. And we also have product marketing. And I'll just break out these ones a little bit. So, for example, frontline sales, the creation of pitches and assets are such a key indicator. Obviously, as a proposal marketer, a proposal writer, you know how to do this. You know how to sell things and pitch things. So just, get in there, make your own content. You can probably extract stuff you've already used, but then, you can even create your own fictional examples if you want to, just to use as part of your portfolio going forward if you happen to be branching out to another company. But even within your own company, you can still do this, and you can still say, I work at an engineering firm, for example, and we have so much technologies that I personally, as a layperson, am unfamiliar with, but it's just a matter of time. You're going to be sitting down with the various subject matter experts, the various engineers in this case, to learn about how things work. And then you could be like, oh, hey, we're involved with net zero technology. That's awesome. Or we're doing passive house stuff. That's cool. How does it work? And then you can take that and put it together and talk about how, this is how this technology works. Because again, even if you're dealing with, in my case, engineers, you're not necessarily selling to engineers. You might be selling to developers or to architects, for example. So you need to put it in those terms where, it's, just a bit easier to understand. And again, as a writer, knowing your audience is key. So it's just a perfect opportunity to do that. Again, you're going to be in marketing, you're going to be working with sales, and regardless of any animosity that goes on between the Montagues and the Capulets, it's vital that everyone sit down and say, hey, maybe our teenage children shouldn't kill each other over ill-advised romance. And let's talk about how we can win these things. Let's talk about how we can get together and how do these apply. And it's just a wonderful opportunity, because ultimately, even if there is any sometimes miscommunications and stuff, you are all working towards the same goal. So putting yourself out there, even if you're personally, this is something I had to struggle with. It's oh, who the hell am I? No one wants to sit down. But I couldn't have been more wrong. And people want to sit down and talk about hey, what are we working towards? What are our key goals? Are we how are we reaching out to our clients, and how are we discovering their particular pain points, for example, or what are their unspoken needs when you're looking at, say, an RFP? Because there's always the very explicit stuff page count and we're targeting these initiatives, but there's always the unspoken stuff that you learn to read between the lines towards, and you can target that and go towards it. Again, dealing with proposals, for example, I'm sure you've all heard the term debrief, and I can't, by the slight segue, I cannot stress this enough, but debriefs are not always about, oh, why didn't we get the job? Why didn't we win? Asking, why did you choose us? Why did we win this project is just as important, I think. And this information is vital, because you can have the opportunity now to sit down and interview with them and say, oh, hey, well, that's great. Or if we didn't meet what you were looking for this time, let's have an opportunity to sit down and talk about okay, how can we do better next time, for example? And what do you think of this idea, for example? And it's just a wonderful way to demonstrate, such a key value. And more often than not, I think you'll find people, your customers, whether they are existing customers or new customers, will often welcome the opportunity because they'll like, hey, you guys actually care. It's easy to say, oh, okay, well, that's fine, and move on. But hey, why not? Somebody has, say 15 minutes or half an hour to sit down with you at various points. You can make this work. And again, of course, measuring impact, which of course a key point of this is making sure you have like some kind of like metric or number that you can put towards this. I've personally found that other areas in my firm, for example, accounting, is a huge valuable resource because they can often like analyze things from a different revenue stream than you would necessarily be looking at. For example, IT actually is a good one. And by the way, this is just good policy to be on good terms with your IT people in general. But IT often not to stereotype your typical IT person, but a lot of times they kind of live for this example because it's not all about like telling people to turn their computers on and off and software updates and stuff. If they have the opportunity to like start applying their own like tech macros and do a little programming magic, they will often be happy to say, oh, hey, well, we can like measure like the response rates through our website, for example, or through emails, all sorts of opportunities. And then just jumping over to this other key example of product marketing is now LinkedIn is a perfect example. Everyone is on there. It's weird when somebody isn't on there, frankly, at this point in time. And there's often an opportunity I've found where even though there's competition in our industry, for example, a lot of times there's also a mutual understanding. It's like, ultimately, it's like, hey, we're all in the same boat. For example, we all get it. I personally find marketing people, proposal people, are more than happy to talk to other marketing people, proposal people. They're not necessarily going to give you their proposal and say, oh, hey, this is exactly what we're doing or anything like that, but they still share a lot of the same grievances. So, for example, I go to CSMPS, which is a Vancouver-based marketing community, mainly geared towards the people in the AEC sector. And it's people from all over, like people that are clients of ours or people that we really want to be our clients and we're not quite there yet. But at the same time, like we're all there and sitting down together and just sharing different ideas and working together in this, very specific community. So it's a perfect opportunity. And I've always found that approaching it from an example of like, how can we help you? Is perfect. I mean, that's just a kind of a key element of networking in general, but
these two roles are really useful for us. And Paul, just in the interest of time, if you don't mind, pop us along to the next one to think about what other skills that proposal managers might be able to translate over.
Absolutely.
Because we've got a couple other places where people might be able to move along in their careers if you're not quite comfortable sticking with proposals or if you're having trouble getting that traction. So here's where I think, what do you think about these roles for proposal teams too? Have you seen people be successful here, or how do we get started over in these domains as well?
Yeah, thank you very much. Pre-sales and solution. Now, of course, a lot of people working in the tech sector, like a lot of these terms here, like pre-sales and especially like Agile, Scrum, like they originated in the tech sector specifically and have now become more broadly used in like the business sector, marketing sector, and so on and so forth. So it's just like really, it's a wonderful opportunity. Working on a proposal, you are used to like tight deadlines and keeping on track, and often working with very small teams, which are a key component of things like being agile and Scrum processes and using lean processes, for example. They are very customer focused. You often have very tight deadlines because as a proposal, like you work from maybe the start up into the RFP, and then right at the end of the proposal, you're off. So this is, I mean, you've been doing this whole time, this kind of stuff where you're working like, it's very about being like very like kind of boots on the ground and like what do the customers really need right now, and they're going to change their minds, it's going to happen, how do we adapt to this? And it's just a perfect example. So when you frame the projects you worked on in those terms, I mean, that's exactly what they're looking for in those industries. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's jump on. So even if you still have a job, I still have a job, and I have to say, over 16 years working for the same company, yeah, I think it's fair to say I've made myself invaluable. And a lot of times, yeah, this has involved getting out of my comfort zone, going to that point where I had to fight over this imposter syndrome I personally struggle with, and like wondering like these engineers don't want to hear from me. Turns out they do. It's like when I was going to the marketing meetings, I'd be bringing back ideas and say, oh, hey, listen, this is what these people in the panel sector are looking for. And even stuff like this, I mean, public speaking is such a vital thing. So many people struggle with it. So having the opportunity to even like lead little meetings, and you're teaching people who are, I mean, these people are engineers and stuff, but they don't know the information you have. And if they want to do well with their jobs, they need to listen to what you have to say. And trust me, there is going to be someone who recognizes it, especially at the executive level. Like I've been lucky enough to have several people, like, the partners, principals, who like keyed into this and say, oh my God, like this is really important. Like, Paul, please, like, sit down. You need to like kick our butts a bit and tell us what's going on. And again, like I have to say, even before I got into marketing, I joined my company as an admin assistant. And that was even a temp job. But that whole time I was answering phones, I was like editing specs and all these other documents. This is vital skills. You wear so many hats, and trust me, like even if someone doesn't need a proposal right now, they may need something else done. So there's no reason why you can't say, oh, hey, like if you guys are slammed over in the admin side, sure, let me help you out here. It just shows that you're willing to put yourself back out there or try out a different thing. On a slightly less marketing side, I'm the first aid respondent in our office. Something I wasn't really physically ready for, but just the fact that I've already learned through proposals, learning to like react very quickly and keep things in scale, make sure nobody loses their heads. This stuff is really important when you're dealing with like a CPR issue or anything like that. So perfect example.
Talk about invaluable. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you.
The first aid responder. That's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Just put yourself out there. Like, yeah, there are so many different areas. And again, just raise your hand. Like the worst they can say is no. But if you keep doing it, they're going to realize, hey, like, why aren't we welcoming? Like most people at some point are going to recognize, oh, hey, you're at least trying. You're at least putting yourself out there. You're taking some initiative. And there's going to be someone who cares. It's not as scary as you think. Trust me. And I speak from personal experience here. So yeah, next slide, please, Kathryn. So yeah, again, making yourself indispensable. Like we've got writing, we've got data analytics, we've got project management. I mean, the writing is pretty self-explanatory at this point, but a lot of times engineers know how to write for engineers. They don't know how to write for like, the architects or developers or even any other type of client, whereas you've adapted the skill already. So you can put them out there and they're like, oh, and don't worry, you're not putting yourself out of a job by doing this, because, they may appreciate this knowledge. It's not to say they're going to take over, because they're engineers, for example, in my case, or, they could be architects, or they could be, any other key industry person that you happen to be working with. And again, the data analytics, again, I already mentioned like talking to accounting, talking to IT. These are just perfect examples. Again, proposal management, you are going to be like at least tracking like, how are we doing like in this quarter, for example, or how did we do this year in terms of our wins and losses? So again, this is just a perfect example of, analyzing the data. And again, the project management, even though at the proposal end, you're often dealing with like the very first part of a proposal, you can still spread that out, because just going back to things like Agile and Scrum, where it's all about breaking things into like little sprints and little increments, you can totally expand that into any area or project. And again, just speaking with in terms of support I get from the engineers I work with, I've had people say, oh, hey, you should come in and sit down in this meeting, and it talks about like how we like approach this whole building process and like how we're going to be implementing all these systems throughout a building. It's like, there was a part of me that wonders like, well, like, I don't need to know this, but it's so useful. Like, and again, it's just an example of putting yourself out there, and you basically, people will notice. It's like, oh, hey, you were involved with this and you're involved with that. And there's no reason why that can't apply to any other aspect you want to talk about going forward. And yeah, branch yourself out there. It's such a wonderful skill set to have, proposal management, because there are so many opportunities out there for us. Thank you.
Absolutely. Paul, what I really love about the fact is that you're talking about how you've essentially recession-proofed yourself, right? About how you've taken the initiative to become, again, which is not what I was expecting to hear today, but a first responder in your organization. And you've taken the chance to really promote your own skills in a way, because I think what we hear all the time is that perception is everything, right? And if you're seen as being a valuable member of the team, which is really what you've accomplished here, is that you can shield yourself against some of the aspects of the recession that may be looming ahead of us. Do you agree?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Really, really thoughtful points on that, and really great advice about how we can use our external teams to help build data analytics for ourselves so that we can actually even prove our own value internally. So I'm so glad that we had an opportunity to share that. And I thank you so much for that really valuable input. Now it is time for Kristen. Excuse me, I'm taking a look at the questions really quick. Do y'all mind if we take a slight departure into this question? Cool. Our fellow presenters, I see a thumbs up.
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay, I see. How do you make yourself invaluable to your company? So we'll take a couple minutes to talk about this. What I would advise here, Rita, is saying that number one, if you can measure the impact, key part of this process is to describe how much revenue you're touching every year and what percentage of your company's revenue that constitutes. Because if you're saying, we drive 90% of the revenue at the firm, and that's like 10, 12, 50, $120 million, then all of a sudden, if they lose your expertise, the company is at higher risk. So characterizing yourself, the loss of your job function as a risk to the company, helps you weather recessions a little bit more. Paul and Kristen, do you have any comments on that as well?
I think definitely to that point about measurability. I mean, that is a common denominator, right? The ability to really demonstrate those metrics. I think when it comes to making yourself invaluable to any company is versatility and adaptability. You have to be able to demonstrate that you can jump from one type of task to the other, but still tie it together with that sort of golden thread, as Kathryn sort of referred to earlier, is there has to be a commonality to create sort of that believability. You can say all day long that, oh, I think I could do X, Y, or Z type of task or add this type of value, but most people want to know where you've come from and what the connection is between what you've done previously or what you've been doing in your primary role. And how that connects to what it is you'd like to do or in what ways you'd like to branch out. So I think making that connection for people and not assuming that they know what that connection is I think very, very important.
Key. Rita, I see a thumbs up. Sounds like we got your question answered. I think that's a really good question because we can say, here's our strategy, right? But if we don't have those individual implementable steps, then what is our presentation about today? Great question. Glad you asked it. Kristen, are you ready to talk about describing your skills?
I am.
Awesome. Let's get started.
Sure thing. So for anyone, if you see me glancing off, this is not a drill. So I've got a variety of notes just to keep me a little bit on track. But the ultimate question, right, is, why a skill-based resume, right? So first and foremost, I think it's really helpful for those of us like Kathryn and myself who consider ourselves serial job hoppers, because if you don't sort of structure your resume potentially in this way, you run the risk of it becoming a giant mess because you've got a giant list of experience that you've accumulated over the years. So in reality, it really creates a much better format versus listing those years of experience. It's easier to create and demonstrate that golden thread that Kathryn was referring to. And of course, the obvious would be it allows you to demonstrate those transferable skills that we're sort of talking about and how you ultimately deliver results. So that's obviously arguably even more important than the experience itself is. We want to focus on, and the hiring manager will likely focus on, and get less hung up on the titles or positions that you've held, and instead, kind of like what David was talking about in the previous session is, make time for or focus on what truly matters, which is what you did or what you do or what you can do, not necessarily where you did it, right? And so I think the skills formatting sort of allows us ultimately to do that. So centering on those transferable skills, formatting it in, listing the skill, the source or sort of where that sort of came from, and ultimately the result or the measurable outcome, followed by the list of the job experience of where you actually took these things on, which we'll get to in the next slide or two. Before we move to sort of the next slide, talking about the different skills that hiring managers, I think, are really looking for, kind of as I mentioned, and as Kathryn sort of alluded to earlier, my job search sort of re-began fairly recently. So she had asked me to kind of speak to, and I'm happy to do this in the Q&A too, if anyone has any more additional questions about it, about how this relates to, or what some examples I personally have during my most recent experiences in the interview process, and having submitted my resume again as of late. So some things that sort of stood out to, I think, some of the people that I've spoken to is the visual identity of my resume that indirectly communicates a skill that I have, or at least a passion, and that is for document design. So when I was in graduate school, I had a visual identity project, like a personal brand project. And since I created that, it has been a part of my resume. So that is something I try to use to help myself stand out amongst other average looking resumes, or, you can sometimes tell when a template has been pulled from Google or from Pinterest or anywhere else, right? So document design is something I'm super passionate about. I'm not incredibly skilled at, but something that I'm continually trying to grow. And that visual identity and stepping, sort of away from the crowd and trying to stand out through that personal logo or personal brand is sometimes what gets attention. My objective statement is sort of a balance between a summary of what I've done or who I am or what I do, but even further than that, it's a philosophy. So for me, my philosophy is communicated about what my views are on writing, how that sort of informs my approach. And that comes down to, audience awareness, asking the right questions, and a variety of other, hot button topics that really translates to not just the writing space, the proposal space, but pretty much any role you could potentially take on. The other thing that I think has stood out, not necessarily as much in this recent job search, but in previous job searches, are my languages. So whatever it is that shows your cultural competency or other unique skills that you have. I'm a first generation Italian American. I was raised speaking Italian as my second language. That seems to fascinate some people. Even if they don't ask about it, I get to use it as an example to demonstrate, again, my ability to work with people of various backgrounds, cultures, and so on. And I feel like, especially with things like diversity, equity, and inclusion becoming really prominent in pretty much any industry that we're working on, that is really something that even if they don't ask about it immediately, really is taking itself to the forefront in a lot of the spaces we're working on. So if we can move on to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about what these hiring managers are sort of looking for skill-wise. We've probably seen a lot of these, right? Communication at, again, the forefront of what everyone seems to be, looking for, the ability to present, to speak to a variety of people, written, verbal, on paper, in multimedia in some cases as well. Writing and literacy, as we think about it, is more than just words on paper. Absolutely, especially in the modern world. Analytical, kind of like what Kathryn was referring to earlier, the ability to tell a story, interpret your data, and that can take many different forms, as she said. Leadership. So I personally, in the last few roles, have actually been in proposal leadership. I've led, the North America branch of my global proposal team at my last firm. I had a team of 9 at a Fortune 100 company that I was working at previously. And I really do try to put at the forefront when it comes to my skill sets about how many people I've managed. What does that sort of look like? In what ways was I mentoring them? That obviously is a pretty critical skill as well. And of course, technical, right? If we're working in AEC or tech or science or any sort of space, technical skills certainly are prominent there. In terms of where I've had to kind of, sort of highlight which of these skills I have and how I've done that. Communication front, I'm a writer, I'm an editor. I've got over 10 years of experience with that. My master's degree is in professional writing, and people want to see writing samples. So I've had to be very creative about what I put in my portfolio. So in proposal development, the obvious is past proposals that are available in public domain or through an open access request. But even beyond that, I've given people, links to my thesis from, my master's degree. And it's not necessarily a topic that everyone's super duper interested by, but it shows people how I write outside of the proposal space, and kind of gives them a sense of my personal voice. And I've also sometimes included writing that isn't on paper. As I mentioned, writing and literacy expands into multimedia. And so I share sometimes links of videos I personally created, mini documentaries that I've created. So think outside the box is ultimately what I think the message is there. On the leadership front, I would say, my objective statement talks a little bit about how I learn from the people that I mentor or lead. And that seems to have drawn some degree of attention as well. Analytical, I'm not a numbers person by any stretch, but certainly when you're in leadership, measuring metrics is very much a part of your daily life. And so the ability to figure out what metrics are most important and what to do with them, I would say that's something that gets highlighted as well. And then from the technical side, in proposal development, a lot of the technical skills include things like knowledge of learning management systems, especially if you're going into curriculum design. That's really pivotal. Content automation, right? Your Lupios, your RFPIOs, so on and so forth, and your CRMs as well, your client relationship management systems. People ask me about my experience with that all the time. So if we move on to the next slide, let's talk about what a skills-based resume sort of looks like. So the link to this sample is in the chat. I believe Ben sent that out at the beginning of this session. Super quick overview. The top is, of course, your skills and abilities, mapped out with your different golden threads, your proposal management, your writing, so on and so forth. And you've got your skill, your source, and your outcome in that order. And followed by then your education or your experience. I would throw in as well, from my experience working with resumes, depending on what level of experience you have, you could actually flip your education and your experience. The way it was argued to me in my school days anyway, in grad school, was a lot of people, if you're competing with other candidates that have the same background as you do, or the same level of training as you do, your education may not stand out quite as much as your experience does. So that's not necessarily the same for everybody, but treat this with the flexibility and the practicality that applies to you. Again, start with your golden threads, include your metrics, interpret those golden threads as broadly as you see practical. So stretch, but don't pull a muscle, right? So for the next slide, of course, we're going to talk about not just where our resumes in practical form or in physical form take, but where everyone else is seeing our resumes, which is LinkedIn. I would certainly argue that resumes to some extent feel like a formality. In some cases, they really are the first impression, because modernly our first impression is found online. There's a variety of things we have to keep in mind when it comes to making a really good LinkedIn profile. Some of these are probably at the forefront of your guys' mind as well. A professional photograph, your headshot, if you will. To make this, again, accessible and practical, we all know a real true blue photographer somewhere, even if they're not specialized in headshots exclusively. We don't have to rely on our cell phones necessarily for this, although certainly in the right hands, the cell phone could work perfectly well. The next component for what's particularly important in terms of elements, interesting or potentially unusual summary, catering those, Boolean terms, if you will, keeping in mind those keywords. Like I said, I talked about in my objective summary. It's a little bit different on my resume than it is on my LinkedIn. Personally, my LinkedIn is more of a career recap, but on resume, it's a little bit shorter. And again, it focuses more on my approach and my philosophy. Again, how you do your work, not necessarily just what you do. Think differently about that question also of what do you do? I would challenge people to kind of reframe it as what are you passionate about? And make yourself human, right? We have to sell ourselves in that capacity as well. Sorry, Kathryn, I realize I'm flying through this. Is there something you wanted to interject?
No, I'm so sorry. I forgot that I wasn't on mute. And I was just like, oh, I love that. I love that piece where you just said about the passion, but I thought I was muted. But
no, not a problem at all.
That's really helpful. Yeah.
And I can't even take credit for it. I'm a huge fan of the minimalists. That is absolutely their nugget of information, that we waste so much on ourselves about what it is that we do, and that our jobs define our identities, and we're so much more than that, and we need to communicate that in the job search as well. For point number 3, measurable accomplishments, again, the metrics, the highlights, that's where that kind of comes in handy. Strong headline. What you pick in those keywords, is about who you are, not just what you are. I am a writer, but I am also something else, right? And certainly, your engagement can include, or activity can include what you do on LinkedIn or your level of engagement within that, but also what's off of LinkedIn, right? Is community engagement. What kind of initiatives are you part of? What is important to you ultimately? A lot of my past was literacy projects, so I've kind of emphasized a little bit of that. And finally, certifications, right? So those letters after your name mean something to you, to somebody else. So don't neglect that. So since LinkedIn is, of course, our primary form of networking professionally, I will take this back to Kathryn to talk more about networking.
All right, absolutely. This is really great. Kristen, such strong points around exactly how to describe the way that leadership plays a role in your resume. I thought those were really good points about those 4 attributes of what employers are looking for. So glad that we dove into those. And particularly, I loved this part about being an interesting person, because you bringing up the fact that you have this Italian language competency, I think catches people's eyes. And we really often minimize the kind of window dressing or the kind of wow factor of who we are as people. And that actually helps us get hired. And I think this get busy networking, we talk about how your resume can help you. We talk about how these technical documents or clicking the button on the applicant tracking system can get you somewhere. But everybody here on this webinar, who's presenting, I met y'all through networking. I met almost everybody. I met a lot of you who are here visiting us and listening to our presentation through networking. So this is how, if you have a community safety net, your resume is going to go a lot farther because more people are going to distribute it out into the ether. So let's talk just a little bit more about why networking is such a great idea when you're on the job search and when you're trying to recession-proof yourself, because it gives you that safety net. So the continuing education piece of networking is something we cannot underestimate. You can continue to learn from people. You can help get those additional pieces of information that will drive your career forward and help you really become a professional that has the cutting edge technology because you've been talking to your friends. And that's really all we're doing here with networking, is like making friends and talking to them on a cadence. It's really, really simple. But networking also leads us to stronger job growth so that we can actually bypass those applicant tracking systems. Because right now, to be honest with you, I'm on the job hunt and I am looking for, friends who can say, hey, let me pass your resume along to such and such person, instead of having to just spam through LinkedIn posts. It makes it a lot easier. And then finally, if you are job hunting, if you do get laid off, that community and support is so important. I know Kristen and I actually had a lot of conversations that were really meaningful to me after the layoff that she experienced. And I think that just being able to have some people who can sympathize or make you feel like, hey, everything's going to be okay, is a huge benefit as, again, this recession environment kind of starts to emerge in our space, right? So the ways, what are you going to need in order to be successful at networking? Number one, get a LinkedIn. Use those tools that Kristen just described. Use those processes. We can put some additional resources about how to get your LinkedIn profile really spun up to be super attractive to recruiters. Also, I'm going to have to tell you that getting the paid subscription makes a really big difference. You can message people for free. You can reach out to people. You can get those key bits of information, and you're not having to wade through paywalls or have to figure out how to circumvent processes, right? Spend the $30, get the LinkedIn paid subscription. You also will need a calendaring system of some sort. I would recommend Calendly. We're not paid by these people, but Calendly is super helpful because it just provides you with a link where people can auto schedule themselves onto your calendar. And then you're going to probably need 2 to 3 hours a week, which sounds like a lot. But again, recession proofing yourself requires effort, right? If things are going to go badly, or maybe, maybe they not end up in your favor in your organization, you need to create your own safety net. That takes time. Set aside a couple lunch hours a week, start meeting some people, say, hey, we'll eat our sandwich together. Like, let's just get to know each other a little bit more. Again, to Ben's point here in the chat, Pi does offer a really great place for you to build this community. And we want to figure out how we're adding value into our community, right? We're connecting people. Maybe we're delivering some new ideas, offering empathy, answering technical questions. So who are you and what can you bring to this networking opportunity that will allow other people to want you to come on board at their organization? I build my network by actually, I research prospects into my network, just like I research prospects into a sales funnel. So people like Kristen, people like Paul, people like Ben, who's sitting next to me, these are people who I qualified into my network because I wanted them for their specific skills. So this it's a little bit more intense than just, connecting with somebody next door. You're really wanting to make sure that these people will add value into your personal endeavors and ultimately be able to not only be friendly with you, but advance your career as well. So I get really clear about how I'm going to approach these people when I connect. I get clear on what I can offer to them. I also describe the actions that we can take together to both be successful. And that's how networking really, really gets to the crux of things, because I feel like there's a lot of networking opportunities where people will say, oh, do a lunch roulette or chat roulette or whatever. Like there's some kind of like, auto populated type of thing where you can get to know a bunch of different people, but they aren't folks who really have value for your network. So again, you want to qualify, you want to dial in your messaging, know exactly what you're going to say to that person, provide them something in exchange for their time, and then make sure that you have actions after you connect so that you can move forward together. This one's kind of easy. In order to successfully network, you have to be interesting. Paul's super interesting. Kristen's interesting. Ben's super interesting. One of the things that I bring to the forefront, like Kristen's comment about the Italian language, very interesting. Paul's piece about, hey, I'm the emergency responder at my office. Like, I think everybody's ears probably perked up when they heard that. My interesting thing is that I'm a competitive strongwoman. In fact, I'm ranked second in the nation in my weight class, right? Like I'm super into this. And there's so much fun stuff that we can connect with when we're talking about our hobbies or our interests. And to Kristen's point earlier, everybody's got a passion. So become the interesting person that other people want to meet. And this doesn't mean you have to have a high job title. This means you're just somebody who has a passion, who can help other people solve their problems, you catch someone's eye for whatever reason it is. And I know that there are several people here on this webinar today we've caught each other's eyes because of things like this. So if you can offer a benefit to whoever is joining you in your network, and you can just be an unusual and interesting person, you're so much more likely to get that traction. And this is not a typical advice for a resume seminar. We realize this, right? But if your resume is going to get that traction, if you have an online presence that gives a picture of who you are as a person, it doesn't have to be strongman. It doesn't have to be Italian language. It doesn't have to be emergency response. It can be whoever you are. Just become an interesting person and tell everybody why you're so interesting. Pretty simple. Okay. Shameless plug, because why are we all here? For PI, Proposal Industry Experts, right? If you connect within PI, if you use these networking principles to access the almost 200 people who are already in our community, ready to talk about proposal management topics, this is another way for you to, again, just build up that armor to help protect you if something does go wrong because of this recession, and also to help you think about where you might need to go next, because we're not just trying to retain our jobs right now, we're trying to develop ourselves into more sophisticated professionals, of course. And so connecting within the PI community, we actually highly recommend that, because we have some of the leading experts, including Paul and Kristen, who are part of our Baker's Dozen, and Ben and myself. We have leading experts that can help troubleshoot your resume, who can take a look and say, hey, is this going well or not? And really just help you develop that network that will help keep you safe through this. So, okay, let's do a real quick little tidy up here. Recession proofing yourself. You're going to find a common thread. You're going to share a story. You're going to tell how you have connected all your jobs. If you're a serial job hopper like Kristen and myself, you're going to help tell the story of who you are and really help people understand what you can bring to their organization, even if you're not applying for proposal roles. Okay. Second, you're going to get out of your comfort zone. You're going to take a look at other disciplines within your organization, to Paul's point, like data analytics, like product marketing, like your technical side of the house, so that you can become more indispensable and start digging yourself in a strong position to fortify yourself against layoffs. Third, you're describing your skills, not the experience. We want to talk about what we're delivering to an organization, how we do it, and the job title, therefore, is not as important, right? The job title isn't important, your skills really are. And then finally, get busy networking. Make friends that will help you bypass all those gates and get you in the door so that you can actually get the job of your dreams. Okay. Before we tidy up entirely, though, I do want to let you know that we have a launch contest that is going on. We have 3 total packages that we'll be announcing who the winners are within the Pi community today. So Ben's going to put the link for the tribe or for the Pi community into our chat right now so that you can log up. You're going to sign up and you're going to comment on a contest post within the community. This book package is unparalleled. It's $150 worth of really, really amazing proposal content that will help, again, prepare you technically so that you are out there crushing the resume building game. And again, we'll be announcing winners later today, so don't hesitate over there. And then after this, we'll have an additional Zoom meeting where you can come and Q&A with Paul, me, Kristen, Ben. We're all just going to be sitting there having some coffee, kicking back, a little bit less formal. You can ask questions, you can show us your resume, and we can do some troubleshooting. Whatever you'd like to do, we're just going to hang out. And Ben's going to put the link to that in the chat here momentarily as well. So now, we are all done with our launch day. We have had 2 webinars today. Well, first, we talked about the heresies of proposal management. If you joined us for that, thank you so much. It was great to get started there. Second, we had this wonderful presentation all about how to recession-proof yourself as we move forward into this spicy economic environment, right? But it does not end there. We have 2 additional presentations that are coming up later this week where we're talking about how to recession-proof your team and recession-proof your business. Again, preventing layoffs, getting those dollars in the door. So when it comes down to it, remember that the Pi model, we're thinking about innovation, inclusivity, and access. So who are we as an organization? We're offering information in a really accessible and easy to understand format. We're making sure that everybody's being heard, and we're also helping you get those top-notch best practices so that when you move forward within your organization, you're going to be prepared for success. Oh, I apologize, it froze up a little bit. So what are the ways in which Pi does this for you? Pi is your community. We have an online platform where you can join to connect and ask questions. This is the heart of who we are as proposal industry experts. And Ben and Olivia and I, everybody on the Baker's Dozen have been working so hard to deliver this into your hands. So we have community. Second, we have education. So you're going to be getting webinars, articles, blog posts, podcasts. The endless stream will continue of the best, freshest, piping hot news in the proposal space so that you can, again, recession-proof yourself against the future. And then finally, what does the future of Pi look like? We're working on a mobile app. We have a lot of exciting things around that. Ooh, teasing it a little bit. There we go. And then we want to hear your voice because we are still so early in this process. Now is the time for proposal managers to have your voices heard so that we can drive our content towards your needs. We're hypothesizing, but your input is super important. So if you've got comments, questions, words of wisdom, please join us at proposalindustriexperts.com. We also, you're also fully prepared to link up with me on LinkedIn if you feel so inclined, and we have a LinkedIn presence for Pi as well. Additionally, join us in the community. Join us in this Q&A that's coming up here in just a few minutes, and don't hesitate. We're here for you. Pi is the proposal management community for proposal managers. By proposal managers, we want to hear your voice. So thanks again today to Paul and Kristen for being such exceptional voices in the space. We're so glad to have you on the Baker's Dozen. We're so happy you're here today. And we'll see everybody in the follow-up Q&A session.